As we know it today, Christmas is an annual festival commemorating the birth of Jesus Christ, observed on December 25th as a religious and cultural celebration among billions of people around the world. Preceded by the season of Advent, or the Nativity Fast, Christmas initiates the season of Christmastide, which historically in the West lasts 12 days and culminates on Twelfth Night, a festival that takes place on the last night of the 12 days of Christmas, marking the coming of the Epiphany. Christmas is celebrated on January 7th in most Oriental Orthodox and part of the Eastern Orthodox traditions. Some Anabaptists, such as the Amish and Armenian Apostolic Church, celebrate Christmas on January 6th, and the Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem celebrates Christmas on January 19th. Christmas was decided by the Church in the early 4th century to be a fixed date of December 25th, although the month and date of Jesus' birth are unknown and not mentioned in any scripture, corresponding to the date of winter solstice on the Roman calendar. The celebratory customs associated in various countries with Christmas have a mix of pre-Christian, Christian, and secular themes and origins. Of course, today we're most familiar with the popular modern customs of the holiday, including gift giving, completing an Advent calendar or an Advent wreath, Christmas music and caroling, viewing a nativity play, an exchange of Christmas cards, church services, a special meal, and the display of various decorations, including Christmas trees, Christmas lights, nativity scenes, garlands, wreaths, mistletoe, and holly. Additionally, several closely related and often interchangeable figures, known as Santa Claus, Father Christmas, Saint Nicholas, and Christkind, are associated with bringing gifts to children during the Christmas season and have their own body of traditions and lore. Of course, Christmas is a shortened form of Christ's Mass. Christ obviously coming from the Greek Christos, a translation of Hebrew Mashiach, meaning Messiah, literally, which translates roughly to anointed, and Mass coming from the Latin Missa, the celebration of the Eucharist. The term Christian Mass was also used in the past. The first recorded Christmas celebration was in Rome on 25th of December 336. In the 3rd century, the date of the Nativity was the subject of great interest. Around AD 200, Clement of Alexandria wrote, "There are those who have determined not only the year of our Lord's birth, but also the day, and they say that it took place in the 28th year of Augustus, and in the 25th day of the Egyptian month Pachon, May 20th. Further, others say that he was born on the 24th or 25th of Pharmuthi, April 20th or 21st. Various factors contributed to the selection of December 25th as the date of celebration. It was the date of the winter solstice on the Roman calendar, and it was about 9 months after March 25th, the date of the vernal equinox, and a date linked to the conception of Jesus, now Annunciation, a Catholic and Eastern Orthodox celebration. Christmas played a role in the Arian controversy of the 4th century. After this controversy ran its course, the prominence of the holiday declined for a few centuries. The feast regained prominence after 800 AD when Charlemagne was crowned emperor on Christmas Day. Later, during the Protestant Reformation, the Puritans banned Christmas in England, associating it with drunkenness and other misbehavior. It was restored as a legal holiday in England in 1660, but remained disreputable in the minds of many people. In the early 19th century, Christmas was reconceived by Washington Irving, Charles Dickens, and other authors as a holiday emphasizing family, children, kind-heartedness, gift-giving, and Santa Claus. Christmas does not appear on the list of festivals given by early Christian writers Irenaeus and Tertullian. Origen and Arnobius both fault the pagans for celebrating birthdays, which suggests that Christmas was not celebrated in their time. Arnobius wrote after AD 297, The chronography of 354 records that a Christmas celebration took place in Rome in 336. In the East, the birth of Jesus was celebrated in connection with the Epiphany on January 6th. This holiday was not primarily about the Nativity, but rather the baptism of Jesus. Christmas was promoted in the East as part of the revival of Orthodox Christianity that followed the death of the pro-Arian emperor Valens at the Battle of Adrianople in 378. The feast was introduced in Constantinople in 379, in Antioch by John Chrysostom towards the end of the 4th century, probably in 388, and in Alexandria in the following century. December 25th was the date of the winter solstice on the Roman calendar. A late 4th century sermon by St. Augustine explains why this was a fitting day to celebrate Christ's nativity. Hence it is that he was born on the day which is the shortest in our earthly reckoning, and from which subsequent days begin to increase in length. He therefore, who bent low and lifted us up, chose the shortest day, yet the one whence light begins to increase. Linking Jesus to the Son was supported by various biblical passages. Jesus was considered to be the Son of Righteousness, prophesied by Malachi. Unto you shall the Son of Righteousness arise, and healing in his wings. Malachi 4:2. According to Stephen Hijmans of the University of Alberta, it is cosmic symbolism which inspired the church leadership in Rome to elect the southern solstice, December 25th, as the birthday of Christ, and the northern solstice as that of John the Baptist, supplemented by the equinoxes as the respective dates of conception. There are varying theories regarding the origins of Christmas, two of the most prominent being the calculation hypothesis and the history of religions hypothesis. In the early Middle Ages, Christmas Day was overshadowed by Epiphany, which in Western Christianity focused on the visit of the Magi. But the medieval calendar was dominated by Christmas-related holidays. The 40 days before Christmas became the 40 days of St. Martin, now known as Advent. In Italy, former Saturnalian traditions were attached to Advent. Around the 12th century, these traditions transferred again to the 12 days of Christmas, a time that appears in the liturgical calendars as Christmastide or 12 Holy Days. The prominence of Christmas Day increased gradually after Charlemagne was crowned emperor on Christmas Day in 800, King Edmund the Martyr was anointed on Christmas in 855, and King William I of England was crowned on Christmas Day 1066. By the High Middle Ages, the holiday had become so prominent that chroniclers routinely noted where various magnates celebrated Christmas. King Richard II of England hosted a Christmas feast in 1377, at which 28 oxen and 300 sheep were eaten. The Yule boar was a common feature of medieval Christmas feasts. Caroling also became popular and was originally performed by a group of dancers who sang. The group was composed of a lead singer and a ring of dancers that provided the chorus. Various writers of the time condemned caroling as lewd, indicating that the unruly traditions of Saturnalia and Yule may have continued in this form. Misrule, meaning drunkenness, promiscuity, and gambling, which goes back in England to the Lord of Misrule, known in Scotland as the Abbot of Unreason, and in France as the Prince des Sots, was an officer appointed by lot during Christmastide to preside over the Feast of Fools. The Lord of Misrule was generally a peasant or subdeacon appointed to be in charge of Christmas revelries, which often included drunkenness and wild partying. The Church in England held a similar festival involving a boy bishop, who would be a boy chosen to parody the real bishop. The custom would later be abolished by Henry VIII in 1541, later restored, and later abolished again. Of course, these wild traditions go back to the roots of Roman Saturnalia festival. Associating it with drunkenness and other misbehavior, the Puritans banned Christmas in England in the 17th century. It was restored as a legal holiday in 1660, but remained disreputable. In the early 19th century, the Oxford movement in the Anglican Church ushered in the development of richer and more symbolic forms of worship, the building of neo-Gothic churches in the revival, and increasing centrality of the keeping of Christmas itself as a Christian festival. as well as special charities for the poor, in addition to special services and musical events. Of course, Charles Dickens and other writers would help in this revival by changing the consciousness of Christmas and the way in which it was celebrated, as they emphasized family, religion, gift-giving, and social reconciliation, as opposed to the historic revelry common. Now a little bit about Saturnalia. Saturnalia was an ancient pagan holiday that honored the Roman god Saturn. It took place sometime between December 17th and 24th, and it was an infamous week of revelry, decadence, and the inversion of social and moral roles. The festivities consisted of drinking, eating lavishly, and giving presents. Wealthy Romans paid for the destitute, often by force, and masters would swap clothes with their slaves. Lucian of Samosata, speaking as the god Kronos, boasts about this exuberant time in his poem titled Saturnalia. "During my week, the serious is barred, no business allowed. Drinking and being drunk, noise of games and of dice, appointing of kings and feasting of slaves, singing naked, clapping, an occasional ducking of corked faces in icy water. Such are the functions over which I preside." Other practices would include public sacrifice and unrestrained public sexual behavior. Many of these practices would be intertwined with the celebration of Christmas and greatly influenced the craziness associated with the holiday for most of its history. Christmas also takes much of its influence from European pagan traditions. Even before historical record, pagans would worship the trees in the forest and even bring them into their house and start to decorate them. Mistletoe, for example, was also a plant revered by the Celts and the Norse. Celtic Druids believed that mistletoe would protect them against the elements of thunder and lightning. These Druids would cut off a piece of mistletoe from the trees and then distribute that amongst their people for protection. It was also considered a symbol of peace and joy. Meeting under the mistletoe would call for enemies to put down their weapons and have a truce. Traditional Christmas colors like green and red represent fertility. Burning Yule logs was representative of the returning sun as the days began to get longer again. The Yule log was one of the most widespread Christmas traditions in early modern Europe, with the first recording of its appearance dating to 1184. It has debatable roots, some saying it is an enfeebled version of the ancient Celtic human sacrifices, and others saying it's simply related to a feudal obligation of acquiring firewood. Nevertheless, the log was a huge block lasting for the 12 days of Christmas, and it was not burned completely its first year. Part of it was saved to light the following year's Yule log. While the mostly burned wood waited for its duty to light a new Yule log, it was kept around the house to ward off a range of misfortunes, including toothaches, mildew, lightning, house fires, hail, and chilblains, and inflammation of small blood vessels brought on from exposure to cold. The log also had other magical properties, including a remarkable feature of the log's powers to defecate gifts. It's also been long observed that the custom may have much earlier origins, extending from customs observed in Germanic paganism. As early as 1725, Henry Burns sought an origin for the Yule log in Anglo-Saxon paganism. Norse mythology considered it a fertility ritual, each spark representing new livestock to be born. The events of Yule were generally held to have centered on midwinter, and feasting, drinking, and sacrifice were involved. Yule customs and the traditions of the Yule log, Yule goat, and Yule boar are still reflected in the Christmas ham, Yule singing, and others, which scholar Rudolf Simek takes as indicating the significance of the feast in pre-Christian times. The Yule log was incorporated into Christian celebration in Scandinavia after the Christianization of the area in the between the 8th and 12th centuries. Santa Claus, also known as Father Christmas, St. Nicholas, St. Nick, Kris Kringle, or simply Santa, is a legendary figure originating in Western Christian culture who is said to bring gifts to the homes of well-behaved children, everybody knows, and gives coal if you misbehave. The modern Santa Claus grew out of traditions surrounding the historical St. Nicholas, a 4th century Greek bishop and gift giver of Myra. The British figure of Father Christmas and the Dutch figure of Sinterklaas, who is also based on St. Nicholas. Some maintain Santa Claus also absorbed elements of the Germanic god Wodan, or Odin, who was associated with the pagan midwinter event of Yule and led the Wild Hunt, a ghostly procession through the sky. Features of Santa Claus hold some similarity to the Germanic folk figure Krampus, a horned anthropomorphic figure described as half goat, half demon, who during the Christmas season punishes children who have misbehaved. In the Central European folklore, Krampus was actually one of the companions of St. Nicholas, and may actually have pre-Christian origins. Now, for Christmas caroling, the tradition of Christmas caroling actually began as a tradition of wassailing, which means going from house to house, drinking plenty amounts of alcohol, and enjoying oneself in a noisy, lively way. Wassail itself, being an alcoholic beverage of hot mulled cider, has a connection to pre-Christian fertility rites, singing and shouting to drive away any spirits that might inhibit the growth of future crops, but has a rich history through the centuries of Christmas celebrations and associated with drunken misbehavior, vandalism, and even violence. Santa Claus may also have connections to La Befana, a kindly Italian witch who drops off treats for well-behaved children, or Fro Holly, who gives gifts to women at the time of the winter solstice. Throughout the world, gift-giving mythical beings are part of local traditions. Decking the halls goes back to Saturnalia, where homes and hearths were decorated with boughs of greenery, vines, ivy, and the like. The ancient Egyptians didn't have evergreen trees, but they had palms, and the palm tree was a symbol of resurrection and rebirth. People often brought the fronds into their homes during the time of the winter solstice. During Saturnalia, Roman celebrants often hung metal ornaments outside on trees. Typically, the ornaments represented a god, either Saturn or the family's patron deity. The laurel wreath was a popular decoration as well. Early Germanic tribes decorated trees with fruit and candles in honor of Odin for the solstice. In the 1700s, carolers would sometimes break down doors and demand food and drink from residents. This is a tradition that goes back to Saturnalia, where the rich people would be swarmed by hordes of drunken partiers and would demand the best of what they had. They would sometimes threaten violence and rape, destroy property, and sing songs with lyrics such as, "We've come here to claim our right, and if you don't open up your door, we'll lay it flat upon the floor." Traces of these traditions can still be found in certain carols that are popular today. Caroling was known to drive people to rioting, fornication, and wantonness. And finally, to end on a good note, leaving out milk and cookies for Santa is a tradition that many places practiced, but it began being popularized in America during the Great Depression. According to the History Channel, parents encouraged children to leave cookies for Santa during that time of economic hardship to show that you should always be grateful for the things that you were given, and that giving was just as good as receiving. This concludes our glimpse into the history of Christmas and its traditions. There is, of course, much more of interest that could not be covered at this time, but it would be safe to conclude that Christmas as we know it today is an eclectic mix of various traditions and was not actually known the way that we know it today until relatively recently in our history. Merry Christmas!